Hello, it's Cryptolyze. I hope you're well this Tuesday, 13 February 2024. We're meeting today to talk about CKB and the NERVOS network. So, as usual, we're going to split this video into two parts. A fundamental part in which we will return to CKB, to the news, the use of the NERVOS network, why it has been pumping today for a few weeks and really over the last few hours. Try to really understand what is happening. You will see that there is a fundamental change. And then we will go to the graphic part to project short, medium, long term on purchase prices, sales prices, and you will see that it is very, very interesting. We will start by explaining what NERVOS network is. NERVOS network is a level 1 blockchain originally. It is an infrastructure blockchain which aims to provide tools for developers to build decentralized applications. Something that is all in all rather classic, except that they had a definition that was a little different. They wanted to be a blockchain platform for building universal applications in which there was no limit between I use CKB or I use another blockchain. Everything was instantiated directly within CKB. So there we have the different images. Here it was in 2021, 2022, there it was 2023. It was their site. And there we moved into something where, in fact, we were in a notion of saying that we was building beyond interoperability to build a universal application. Now something very simplistic, very simple, very minimalist, in which we will have NERVOS, which is presented as quite simply the common basis of security and decentralization and modularity. Well, we don't bother, we no longer define whether it's a layer 1, layer 2, etc. We just define that it is the common basis for doing everything. We are really in hypersimplification. Well, if we have to get into the technique, what are CKB and NERVOS network in concrete terms? It is a blockchain which takes care of interoperability with all other blockchains, so it itself takes care of providing ground zero, therefore layer 0. It takes care of providing the notion of consensus layer, and the notion really purely scalability through a layer 2, in which we have a scalability which is very, very important, all in proof of work, so always in this consensus which is considered to be the most resilient, although the proof of stake is equally resilient, but there are advantages to each other. If we look a little at the discussion between Vitalik Buterin and the BTC maximalists, there is always one who is superior to the other, but it depends on what point of view we sit. However, what really interests us is that CKB has a solution that is complete. As I've explained to you several times, the problem with CKB is that it didn't really have strong enough points of differentiation to attract enough people. We have quite few ecosystems, we have a valuation behind it which is quite low. We are talking about the CKB. It is in diluted market cap. We are at less than 300 million. It is very low. And therefore that also means that we are in a middle/small market cap in an acceleration phase as we have experienced, because a few months ago we were half less than that. We were below 150 million. So obviously we had something that was quite weak, except that we started to get a lot of news, including the notion of BTCKB. Therefore, BTCKB, which is the interconnection between BTC and CKB, both are proof of work. Both have nonetheless common points, and in which we could use the resilience of Bitcoin with the hyperscalability of CKB and NERVOS network. This is a bit of the narrative that I spoke to you about some time ago around BTC, and I think that it is something that we will have to monitor closely. And CKB is playing this narrative very clearly with the work around RGB. So, if you don't know RGB, it's a protocol that is built on top of Bitcoin to simply create smart contracts or a smart contract equivalent to Bitcoin. So it is an interest to build decentralized finance on BTC, and there is precisely an interfacing that is being carried out between Bitcoin's XO tools and RGB mapping. With the CKBSL, and therefore implied the NERVOS network. And we have a lot of interest there, so I specifically went to look for information on Talk NERVOS, in which we have quite little information, and it's mostly in Chinese. We see that we have an interconnection between Bitcoin users, and the off-chain part, therefore stateless, which will be in RGB, and next to the CKBL, in which we will in fact decide the different information, the UTX low, which will be in the lock, the type in which we will have the scripts which will be instantiated, the data which will actually be the RGB commitment part. So we have a lot of information, so we are in the process of creating an RGB overlay or an instantiation of RGB in CKB, and it would not be illogical to see within a year, 6 months, 9 months, the setting up a net test of Nervos Network in a BTC scripting part, and having decentralized finance built on Bitcoin thanks to CKB Nervos Network. Once again, we are careful because these are hypotheses. It is something that is being worked on. It is not the Nervos Network team that is working on it. There you go. We always pay attention. These are community initiatives which potentially allow for expansion later. And once again, CKB has an advantage. It is that it is supported by many investors, but unfortunately not enough developers. Will moving towards Bitcoin attract more developers? This is going to be the big question that we will have to ask ourselves, especially if we are implementing a decentralized finance narrative on Bitcoin. So, on a technical level, we will quickly come back to two things. First, we have a bullish phase which ended with the establishment of a distribution in BC, Arkansas, St. Esau. Therefore, stopping the upward trend, we retrace, we retest, we sink into an accumulation of Wyckoff with precisely this very important sign of weakness, in which, moreover, we have remained for a very long time. June being the first phase of bearish inclination, first really stopping phase, second stopping phase, which was carried out in December 2022. And since then, we have held the levels very strongly, and we see that we have a big accumulation phase on 2023 of June. In October 2023, we see that we had a very big phase of accumulation of lateralization, very little volume, with a perfect phase to accumulate CKB for those who were present. Me, generally, when it's like that, I explained to you that there was no differentiating axis at that time and that it wasn't necessarily interesting for me. I was waiting to have prospects of evolution, and in any case a phase of rupture sufficient to tell me that we were breaking the accumulation, something which was carried out in this zone. When we had this retest phase, on January 6th in the private group, I gave the information that I was building an exhibition of CKB, and I exhibited in my ring at the end of months each time I actually give all the information, why I had done it, in what way, etc. So I gave additional information to explain the developments, namely that since then we've still made a plus 120, I think, if I'm not talking nonsense. If you're interested in the private group, you have all the information in the description and comments, and currently we are technically in a retest and resistance zone. So here we are at a very important level. It is imperative to break this part and consolidate above. We must consolidate above the 74 if we manage to consolidate above this level. That means that we will certainly very quickly look for the 37 here to potentially seek a new 88th. The goal being to see whether or not the Nervos protocol will be able to interface correctly with the entire Bitcoin ecosystem. Will the BTC narrative take over, and therefore decentralized finance on Bitcoin? It could be very interesting. If so, we will be able to have big performances at the level of Nervos Network. And on that, if I remove the logarithmic to have a slightly different vision, we will be able to get very quickly, therefore, the ST at 0.35 and get the Bain climax to make a new 88th, make an uptrust, a UT, go and break the 0.44 to get here the 1,618 in the vicinity of 0.7, to know that it's already a very good performance. But if we look at it in relation to capitalization, general that we could have on Nervos Network, I remind you that we are less than 300 million diluted market cap. We can quite easily look for 3 billion. How can we go looking if the narrative is ever played out, 25-30 billion? So we really have good prospects for this ecosystem, namely that we have risks which are relatively controlled, because once again it is something which has not exploded upwards during this phase at the end of 2023. We have a narrative. Potential that can be put in place. Well, it's an ecosystem that is interesting to monitor and control, once again, if we want to expose ourselves on Nervos Network. If you ask questions about how to invest, don't forget that you have in description and comment, alongside the private group, an investment guide which explains my entire strategy for managing the purchase, sale, especially in bull run, all in a very concise and free way, available in comments and in description. And we will meet again very soon for a new video.